Welcome back to another episode of Black Journalists on Journalism. Zoe Berry, my partner in crime, and I are back with a special guest. All of our guests are special, but I'm leaning towards this one a little bit more because this is one of my favorite people in journalism. Nicole Carr of ProPublica and Morehouse College is here with us today. Nicole, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you for having me. Yeah,
Thank you
you're
for
one of
coming
my
on.
favorites too.
Feel
Cole
this Atlanta
is
connection going on here. Listen, I'm
right.
excited about this conversation because Nicole, as I was just saying to you earlier, I want to talk about all the things in terms of getting into investigative reporting and sort of that being a part of your journey and sort of the all the things that people need to know in order to get involved. I think it's really difficult, so I want to talk about that.
It's
But Donnell,
particularly
why don't you kick us off here?
yeah. Well, I want to make sure we stress that it's particularly difficult to get into it for a lot of Black journalists. I don't know if people feel like they can't or aren't being ushered that way in school or whatever, and it feels like when you go to conventions or what have you, you don't see a ton of us. How's that, Nicole?
That's a good question. I was in my early 30s in 2017 when I went to my first IRE convention.
Right.
I didn't know what IRE was at the time, investigative reporters and editors. And I was in a top 10 market, had been through several TV stations. I knew that I sought to do that type of work, and I always wanted to report deeper than the day to day and the quick hits. And had been introduced to the I team when I was in North Carolina and covering Fort Bragg. But I had no idea about this conference, and I considered myself well versed in the industry. And I said,
You were.
"Oh," when I got there to Orlando, I said, "Oh, this is where everyone comes for the jobs, for the talks, for the everything." And so I'd been lifelong NABJ, and obviously like a NABJ baby, had been brought up through NABJ, and had never been introduced to investigative reporters, Black investigative reporters. I,
Yes.
I can remember the Duke lacrosse
Right.
scandal, and seeing Darla Miles at the time. She was at the WTVD in Durham. She's now in New York at ABC7. And Tamara Gibbs. And Tamara ends up being my colleague years later. But I remember watching them from a smaller market. Oh, no, this is high school. This is high school now. Like, I'm going into college and I'm watching them, and I said, whatever they are doing, the way they're breaking this story down, the way they're digging deeper, like, they are badass. I wanna be like them. But so in terms of role models, I would say I saw people doing some things I wanted to do, but they weren't even dubbed investigative reporters. They didn't have the title.
Mhm.
And a lot of people will tell you a title is not important, but let me tell you, a title comes with a schedule, a purpose, a salary.
Right.
Um, so I really hate when I hear news managers tell you, "Oh, a title doesn't matter. Awards don't matter." They matter to you all because that's how you measure. That's how you elevate people, and that's how people are recognized to new uh, folks in the industry and new ideas, and that's how they're tapped. And but I wasn't a speaker at an investigative conference until it might have been 2019. Was it 2019 at IRE? And people were like, "Oh my god, that was so good." And it's one of the few Black speakers, and I'm like, "I haven't changed. My work hasn't changed,
You
but
could
you
have
know
had
what?
me on years ago.
But a title changed. I had a
Mhm.
title, and I had some access to things and people and resources. So now all of a sudden I'm Nicole Carr, investigative reporter, and I'd been doing that work. Um, and so it does matter. Those things do matter because they measure something in the industry. So
Yeah, look, we're only a few minutes into this conversation. You've already spoken a word. Let me tell you,
For
let me tell
real.
you something. That it does matter. The title
it does.
does matter. It opens
Does.
doors in a way for career opportunities that people, that, maybe not have been available to them before. And there's something that you said there about, you're sort of doing the work or you're, in your day to day and whatnot. There's so many of us that are trying to get away from breaking news, get away from spot news, and do more in-depth work, meaningful work. I think
Mhm.
that's a big part of our industry. But let me
Yeah.
take a step back here because I'd love to learn about how you first got the bug to become a journalist. You went to Winston-Salem State, am
Yes,
I
go
right?
Jeez.
Rams, go
And
Rams.
yeah, and you majored in mass communications. This is for your undergrad. You obviously got a master's degree, but talk to us about that time period of your life and how you decided that journalism or communications was where you wanted to go.
So I was either going to be Claire Huxtable and an attorney, or I can't see, I'm blind as a bat. And I thought maybe I'll be an ophthalmologist and help people see. But really wasn't great at the math and science. And then the way that I would kind of get close to my dad was an army officer. He was in special operations, and we moved 10 times before I was 16.
Wow.
And I really cherished the time that I had for kind of to feel connected with him whenever he was home. And so one way you could connect with my dad is two ways: in the kitchen, because he loves to cook. He's that's his labor of love. Or if he would sit next to him while he was watching TV in the evening. And so that TV was always on CNN. It was always on the news. And so I would just sit to be near him. I would sit sometimes in the den or whatever and watch the news and just be aware of what's going on. And both of my parents were really, back in the day, the way television news is appointment TV. That was a thing. My grandparents lived outside of DC. The Washington Post was on the doorstep every morning. And so when we would visit, the newspapers in front of you. So I had like media literacy was important in the family. And so I started looking to that. But my aha moment is in the eighth grade, or was in the eighth grade. We lived in Panama, Central America. We were there at the end of the Canal Treaty. And I had a social studies teacher tell me she wanted me to write an article on a special guest who was coming to speak to the middle school. He came to Corundu Middle School, and it was Terrence Roberts, a member of the Little Rock Nine. And so Terrence Roberts came and told us their story, and I got to write an article about it, and then caught the bug and would start writing articles for the base newspaper. And then the summer before 10th grade, my parents let me go to Cambridge University. I traveled to England and studied abroad by myself to study journalism in a summer program at Cambridge. And then I was editor in chief of the high school paper, 2 high schools, then college, the News Argus at Winston-Salem State. RIP to that. We're gonna figure out a way to get the campus paper back. It died before
Mm-mm.
the pandemic, and that was it. So I would say from 8th grade on, that was that.
You were a
Initially,
lifer.
yeah, a
Yeah.
lifer, yeah.
Yes.
And I loved Connie Chung, and then fell in love with Soledad O'Brien in college and got to meet her. And then, yeah, so I started seeing those people. And I would keep like a notebook of people doing things that I wanted to do. And this is funny. I think it's still at my mom's house, but I would clip like their profiles or magazine article about them. And I said, well, she's an editor of a magazine and she's on television, but she writes books. And I was like, I want to do all of this, but it didn't have a name. It really was multimedia journalism.
Before we called it that.
But yeah, but people weren't doing, you picked a path, right? And then that's
Mm.
what you worked in. And now, of course, the landscape is totally different. So I guess I could see ahead maybe into the future. Or I was wishing for that before it was a thing. And it's a thing. So,
Nicole, you'd be surprised how many of our guests vote for the high school newspaper, the college newspaper. It feels like a lot of people have taken that path and kind of got that bug early in life
yeah.
and took those routes. That's really cool.
Yes, yes. And just having people encourage you and do
Mhm.
that. Oh, the Fayetteville Observer back home in North Carolina, do that in high school and during the summers. So yeah, uh it was You catch the bug early, I think.
So there was a period of time where you went from Winston-Salem to Syracuse and you got your master's in broadcast journalism. And then you started on a run of all these North Carolina TV stations. And how cool was that to be working at home? I'm sure there were difficulties along with that because some of these are small stations.
Oh,
But talk
yeah.
to us about that time.
And difficulties to the tune of 18,500 a year. Yeah. First salary.
For real. That's the
Uh,
difficulty.
yeah, that's difficulty. But
Yeah.
when you have the drive and you don't have the responsibilities and you absolutely need support. A friend of mine who's now a morning anchor, my best friend is a morning anchor in DC. Her name is Jummy Olabanji, and she
Oh,
started
good
out.
friend.
I was very familiar.
Yes, it's my best friend, and we met through NABJ on a plane to the student projects to Atlanta, and we said on the plane. Uh, I said one day I want to report in Atlanta, and she said I want to be back home in DC, and that's what we did.
How
And we
about
were
that?
just in college at the time. And shout out to Greg Lee, he put us on a of the NABJ, past
Man,
president,
he
and
gets a lot of shout outs on this
6
podcast,
degrees of
Greg.
separation on this podcast.
Let me give a shout
yeah,
out to Chumi and her husband as well. Darren, he's good people. And me and him
they.
go back.
Oh, you do? Okay, so we were
Yeah.
just in Panama together on a family vacation for spring break.
Nice.
Darren, drew me and the family. So
Very
yes,
cool.
and we all met on the student projects. Like
Yeah.
you don't know, you could be meeting your husband, your wife, or whoever while you're out here trying to cut your teeth into the business. But we used to talk about why some of our Black counterparts did not stay in the business. Like a lot of people got that first job or maybe made it to the second market and then said, you know what, for various reasons, I'm out. But a big reason is when you don't have the support, when you cannot afford to stay in that arena and just like chase your dreams. um, and you contractually you can't work a part-time job because whatever, especially on air where your image belongs to the station and like they can't see you at the barista at Starbucks or working retail on the weekend. Some people, and a lot of times it falls on us, and we know the stats behind generational wealth and student loan debt or whatever. We literally cannot afford to pursue the career. And I don't think that is talked about enough. But you know what I mean? And so fortunately, so I'll always say my support system was there. I can remember not wanting to go to Indianapolis for NABJ. I think that was 06.
2006. Yeah. I went to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And my dad was like, I'll wire you the money. I'll pay the registration. Like if I didn't have it, my mom says,
Yeah.
don't worry about this. I'm sending you whatever, an outfit I need. Because, this is your career. We go
Yeah.
and we want to
Yeah. Impressed.
present ourselves.
And
Right.
that's when the conferences you're huge with those career, the expos
It's
was big. Yeah.
it's when the ladies didn't were still wearing their heels. I think we've gotten past that. I think we are seasoned enough to know you can step into the
You don't have to
conference with
you don't
that.
have to
You
wear
don't have,
heels.
lady, you don't
Pair of
have to
sneakers
do
on,
that to
same
us.
difference.
Yeah, but we're past that. We're past
Yeah.
that. We're into our natural hair and giving our feet a rest when we go. But yeah. So I went to Wilmington for I believe I like to throw out. Can we talk money?
Yeah, sure.
Yes,
Okay.
please.
I'll
Yeah.
tell you mine too when back at that
Back
point in time
then,
because it wasn't no good.
it's
It
funny
is
for
no
me.
good.
It's funny to
Yeah.
talk about it now, so I'll be glad to talk about it now. Wasn't funny
Yeah.
then.
Yeah. No, it's not fun. So first market 18,520 contract on the years, and I left after a year and a half. Second market was a 3234 in Greensboro, North Carolina. I thought I was rich. 3234. Nashville was a 45. Then I quit, got married out of my first baby, took a year off and returned to the market I was in for the same salary, expanded role, but 45 in the triad. And then went to North Carolina on I went to the Raleigh market, but I was covering Fayetteville, my whole hometown, on a 74, 77, 80 on first contract. And if I'd re-signed, would have gotten into the six figures by the end of the second contract and came to Atlanta, had three contracts. That was one had to do with a raise we were getting uh, from an overtime law or whatever. So
And this is WSBTV.
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I guess this is unconventional to say this, but as a GA in 2016, we were on like a 132, 134 something, and then investigative, I topped out over at 150 by the end of the contract, and then took a slight pay cut to come to ProPublica, but I was playing the long game with my career. And I
Yeah.
can say that it all has come back to me and exceeded things because of the different things that I am able to do. So it wasn't like a money move, and it wasn't a terrible cut, but digital is different from television, and I definitely have a different workflow. You see me sitting at home, right? Like that's not happening
Boy,
in the
you don't have the
TV
pressure of
world.
the daily churn
Hmm.
and deadlines
Hmm.
and all of those things and
Hmm.
specials and whatever
Right.
it is during
Right.
those seasonal
Public
promotions.
appearances,
Right.
Yeah, all of that.
like all of that. And I still do those things, but to my own,
Yeah.
And
it with work my own schedule.
you can't
Hmm.
put a price on the time you get to spend with your family either.
That's right. That's
The comparison.
right. And that's right. And we had our third child. He was 4 months old when
Congratulations.
thank you. Yeah, he was 4 months old when we locked down. And so lockdown did a lot. Lockdown, politically, what we've been going through in the country, socially, start thinking about life a little differently. And also, I really understood that I wanted to do journalism differently, that it
Mm.
was time for me to evolve. And so I had done what I came to do in local TV after 15 years. It was time for me to evolve as a journalist. And I made a very non traditional move that I'm really happy about.
Can,
So,
can we can we dig into that just a little bit because I feel like there's a piece there that will help give us some clarity.
mhm,
How did you one get the first opportunity to start doing what we would put in air quotes as investigative work? Like where did that happen at? Did you get support doing that? Like how did that come about? And then of course, how did you leverage that through your career and particularly in broadcast TV? And obviously, it
mhm.
puts you in a position to be at a place now like ProPublica.
Sure. So I can remember really honing in on Fort Bragg and Fayetteville, my hometown. I really wanted to make a stop there, and the timing was perfect. The two men who had occupied that bureau um, had been there since like the year I was born. And so no, like, their names
Yeah.
Gilbert Bays and Greg Barnes, like, they were ABC 11's bureau. So, Gilbert had left, and it just so happened that I'd been in contact with and I would tell journalists this all the time, especially in TV, 'cause I just got a call for advice the other day. Like, do not wait for someone to post a job for you to, mm, start sending you material or asking about a position or whatever. Me landing at TBD at the time had come after years of being in contact with the news director. Um, Timing wasn't right some other times, and sometimes I just wanted feedback, whatever. So it was hard to fill that bureau because Fayetteville, unless you're military connected, a lot of people don't really desire to live there. They're going to want to live in Raleigh or Durham. But I wanted to go back home. That was perfect for me. And I saw Fort Bragg. Why would you pass up the chance to cover the largest military installation in the world? Right. So that's a game changer for your career. And I could speak the language and whatever.
Right.
So I came around the time that military sex assaults became very important to Congress and how we investigated those and how we did. So I ended up covering some of the first uh, big court martials. Um, General Jeffrey Sinclair, his trial, and because I was able to go in and understand how a military panel is chosen versus a jury in the civilian courts, I could translate the court martial to your experience in civilian courts. And so that led to ABC News Radio using our reports, writing for CNN Digital, and really putting your reports on kind of national stage. And we were doing investigations tied to Fort Bragg and court marshals and soldiers and whatever. And all of a sudden, one day during sweeps, my assistant news director was like, I saw a promo. No, I saw a promo. It was an I-team promo, and I was in it. I was like, "Am I on the I-team?"
Oh
And he
yeah,
was
I
like,
forgot
"Well,
to tell you.
yeah." And he was like, "Well, that
Oh yeah.
story is airing as an investigation." And I knew it was an investigation, but I hadn't been. Didn't have the title. Wasn't on the team, and it was some report we were doing. And all of a sudden, I was turning for that for the I team, which was on my tape for WSB, which got us to having the conversation during the interview. There was no opening, but there was an anticipated opening the following year. And so she's like had me in the back of her mind.
Mhm.
At the same time, that was around the time that Cox had committed itself to helping diversify the ranks of investigative reporting. There was a reporter here named Erica Byfield who headed off to New York. And she was one of two women on the team and the only Black investigative reporter on the team. And I stepped into Erica's position, not immediately, a year after I'd proven that I could do the work, which I did over and over again. And so then I was named,
There was a lot that was said in that sort
For
of
real. No
space, right
words yet.
there. I understand. I understand. Go
yeah.
ahead.
So
Go ahead,
I'm
Nicole.
like, yeah. So now it's on you, balls in your court. And that was, I believe, the plan from along because we had talked about it, but it wasn't mine until, the following year. And that's when I was introduced to IRE. And I was like, oh, this is where you all come. And I didn't see anyone, and we know, it's such an aha moment because we know, like, Topher Sanders, Corey Johnson, Ron Nixon, Nicole Hannah-Jones are sitting at this conference, right? And they say, "We're always the only ones here." And that was
Right.
the truth. I think she may have been speaking that year before I even really knew Nicole.
Mhm.
And that's how the idea for the Ida B. Wells Society came about, like us seeing the same handful of people every year. And now IRE looks totally different, like a few 5, 6 years down the road. And I was looking at pictures from the conference the other day. It's going on right now. I went to another investigative conference this year and skipped out on IRE, but it's a lot more diverse than it used to be. So that's how it happened, just doing the work. And if I'm being honest, besides my desire to tell more in-depth stories, I also knew differentiating myself in the newsroom was a path to uh, having a manageable schedule for uh, everything, more money, more time to work on things occasionally. I feel like, they say these titles don't matter. I feel like when you deliver and you have a title, like people listen to you a different way,
Mhm.
in a different
Mhm.
way. They respect what you say. Have you ever been the go-to person in the newsroom? Like, well, if Nicole will say this, it's gonna hit a little differently than if I do. Like we can help each other in those ways by utilizing whatever the perception of you and your opinion on coverage and being a newsroom leader, whatever that is. You should take advantage of it. I'm not saying it's right for that to be the measure of how we should listen or whose voice matters or any of that stuff. But we are lying to ourselves if we say that these newsrooms don't put some sort of, they don't value that in
Well,
some way.
let me follow up on this just a little bit here, because what you just described, it wasn't like, you definitely had a conversation and it was like it was going to happen for you. It was like, oh no, we're just going to throw you in, and then all of a sudden you're doing the work. And I
Hmm.
think for a lot of people, they are, and this is a good reason why the I to Be Well Society exists. They don't know what that path is. It is very murky for all of us to
It's
sort of
very
say,
much.
how do we transition from, I don't want to be a digital producer anymore. I want to be a reporter. I don't want to be a
Sure.
reporter anymore. I want to be an editor. I want to get into investigations. I want to get off the breaking news desk, the trending team,
Right.
whatever it is. Like, how can I do that? And so my question for you is, what are your thoughts about that? Because I think it's one, difficult to explain that, but also like, how do you put processes in place for newsrooms to figure that out?
So you should always remember that, there's a possibility that wherever you are planted, it may not be wherever your seeds are planted, that may not be where your harvest comes. It may not. But what you can only control what you can control. And so if they're saying, well, we don't have any openings or the makeup of this team is the way we want it and there's no room for this or whatever, that does not stop you from doing the work. You can still, even in your daily grind, right? You can pick away. Investigations they aren't quick. They're not easy. You can pick away, you can carve out, have a FOIA Friday. Have a FOIA Friday where I say on Fridays, I'm just going to get into the newsroom at 8 o'clock instead of starting the day at 9. And I'm filing and I'm looking at my spreadsheet and keeping track of what I filed because the stories, you start developing the story then. And you'll say, I used to do this all the time at Channel 2. Because we had a saying, pitch what you can turn, like you had to come in ready for the
There you go.
day. And
That's Cox
so
Media Group for you.
exactly. And
Yes.
so I would be with, especially some of my favorite photographers. I'd say, hey, before we grab lunch, do you mind if we make a stop here and can you save this interview for me or whatever? And I would be building another story and nothing to do with the day's work. But that's one interview out of the way. I got the FOIA, and all of a sudden, I might have come to the meeting with the first draft of the story and they didn't know it, but I'm pitching it for the first time. Because you tell me,
Mm.
pitch what I can turn. I've already got the story. It took a little more work on Tuesday. It took a little more work last month on one day. But if you say I'm going to carve out the time to build and do the type of work I want to do, that's cool. I mean, I can remember being a GA reporter. I'd never, submitted for the Emmys and stuff, and I knew the station valued that, right? I mean, it was a goal of mine. I would like, before I leave local news, I would like to, at least be nominated to be in the mix. And, I can remember, like, filing live shots. I knew I was a really good live reporter. Like, all that walk and talk and explain things to you and talk off the cuff, I can do that for you. I can break something down. You tell me how much time I have, and I'm gonna break it down for you, and that thing's gonna be sweet. And I'm gonna toss it back to you. And so I knew every time I had that good live hit, I was putting it away, and nobody's submitting for you. At least I'm brand new. Like I'm not in the mix for submissions, but I was like, I'm damn good at live, and that's what I did. I submitted my own, and then I was at the table, within a year, and that was the first of several. And so I don't wait on people to submit for my awards or to give me a title or to do like you're gonna see I can do the damn thing and you're gonna see it. Like if I decide I'm gonna do it, then that who's stopping you? Who's that? And then if someone doesn't recognize you in that space, you now have what you need to move on. If that's what you want to do, you now have the portfolio to move on. But if you're sitting there waiting for somebody to give you a chance, baby,
Damn.
you're gonna be You're gonna be waiting for a whole lot. I have never allowed my career or my aspirations to hinge on a manager, on a station, on call letters, on an organization, I'm always 5 years ahead. And I don't talk about it with anybody except those who I need to, uh,
Confer
to
with.
get, yeah, to get wisdom from,
Right.
to learn something so I know how to navigate something, or if I need to plant a seed of inspiration for someone else, that's when I talk. But I don't talk about my, but I have a whole journal and all kinds of stuff. I'll talk to myself before I talk to a lot
It
of
sounds like
people.
you just gave us another word there, and
Mhm.
it's about initiative, taking initiative in your career, in your work, and all of those things. And yeah, it does take more time. Yeah, it does take more effort. It may, elongate your day, but the
Right.
benefits are you're in control of the things that you want to do in your career in the
Yes.
long term.
Yes. And you can't wait till it's time to go too. Just for folks who are under contract, like you always have to be playing a long game. I don't think there's any other choice because then you're putting power back into the hands of people and institutions and places that should not have that type of power over your desires or what you see for yourself. So,
Nicole, I wanted to ask you, you were talking a minute earlier about people you talked to. Who are some of those mentors that you had that you did talking to, that you knew it would stay
mm,
safe with them?
that's a really good question. So, um, in different seasons, I have different people because as you're elevating or moving through different spaces, there are different people who will understand that part of the journey. And so I've had some great producers or a news. I've had a great news director that I even called him before I transitioned from local TV to ProPublica. His name is Rob Elmore. He's now general manager at WTVD. I respect him so much,
Wow.
and he's seen me grow through the years. That I say, hey Rob, what do you think of that? Like, and we don't have to talk for a year, 2 years, and I'll pick up the phone and say, well, what do you think about this? For money, I call different people. You should investigate salaries and benefits the way you investigate a story. Like I can't even pinpoint one person, but I'll say, hey, when you moved in this year under this company or whatever, what was that? Like I'll research a salary, signing bonuses, that sort of thing with multiple people. I have longtime good friend. Of course, well, Jumi is my go-to for everything.
Right.
We share everything, but she's a sister. I have a really, really good agent now who be real with you, was not going to make a dime off me going to ProPublica, but who could see my vision and then played a huge role in helping me curate the next stage. And so she had also been evolving as an agent. And so she wasn't just reviewing TV contracts, she was cutting book deals. She was doing the, and so she was in a space too that, I mean, she literally called me one day because I've been talking about writing a book. And she said, are you ready to meet with a lit agent? I'm like, when? Well, can you have a proposal ready next week? I lied. Yeah, I had my own note, but I did not have a
An actual proposal.
the proposal together, and I shaped it up, and then he helped me shape it up, and then we sold the book. So like having people who can say, yeah, I believe in that. And I remember her saying, go try something different. If uh give it a year. If it's like, oh, this isn't gonna work out, you know how to do this, you know how to do that. So just having people who know you and kind of, I can't say it enough. I keep saying who can play the long game with you. I'm not out here for a pickup game.
I have quite a few friends in TV, and I know it's a difficult thing to find a good agent. So When you find one, you keep them, right?
Yeah, and I
Uh,
say, shout out her Tracy Wilkes Smith. She is my I consider her an agent and a friend. So she's done a lot in a few years. Yeah.
Gotcha. Can you talk to us a little bit about the book? Because I read
Mhm.
that in your bio that you have a book coming out in 2024. And well, if you could just walk us through what it is, and again, we for those listening on audio, she just crossed her fingers. Just talk to us about what this process is going to be like, because there's a lot going on here.
I actually owe my editor a few chapters that she'll be reviewing next week, because I am working in writing in my free time. For those who can't see, I'm putting free time in quotations, air quotes, writing this book. Well, I during the pandemic, uh, the short of it was, I was able to find my great grandfather's medical school records from Howard University in the wake of the first pandemic, and became very interested in the plight of Black physicians, and the parallels between what was happening 100 years ago and what happened now. And as we talk about racial inequities in health, the role that um, systemic racism and uh, uh, yes, the way these systems have played a role in us having some of the same outcomes over a century. And so
Wait, so
it, but Mhm.
this is during the Spanish flu? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah,
That time period? Okay.
1818.
yeah, yeah.
Wow.
So,
Okay.
I was
And you
very,
still
and
had the journals.
huh,
The family still
I
had the
found,
journals.
well, I found the Howard, and this is so important. And they're in the middle of a process in preserving Black press archives, but I was
Mhm.
able to find over 300 articles with a mention of him, and kind of plot a journey and understand what was happening. A lot of people did not write about what happened during the first pandemic. It's hard for us to imagine. They're not going to have, 100 years from now, they will definitely know what we felt and what we thought during
Sure.
this pandemic. That's not the case then. So I was able to use press archives in Howard University, and archives about social unrest and racial issues in the country at that time, and really say, I started thinking, God, there's so much that is similar. I'm really into paralleling. I I am a fan or proponent. You have to have historically informed reporting. Like, that's just in my journalism. I feel that way, and so I was seeing the same thing here. I said, "Look, I want to write this in a narrative form through the lens of Black physician at the time." Parallel this between 1918 and 2020. So that's what I'm doing. It's a massive project that I'm very passionate about, and I hope to see that in 2024, maybe 25.
Right.
I know how these projects work. Okay. Yeah.
Let me bend down really quickly. I know people can't see, but I went to Victor Luckerson's book talk at the Gathering Spot.
Oh.
The Built from the Fire just came out, and I'm looking at this. I don't know how many pages we're close to like 600 here, right? Just over
Mhm.
600. And he's talking about having moved out there in 2017 or 2018 to start writing this book. I said, "Did your contract always have the same due date for your manuscript?" And he said, "Oh no, we delayed this twice."
Make you feel better.
Good and bad at the same time. Don't know that. I don't know what this is new for me. Book
First
writing
book?
process, first
Yep.
book, and so we'll see. But whenever it does come out, I hope maybe we can talk again.
Oh,
Oh, for
absolutely.
sure.
Do you have a working title?
Oh, we do. Right now we're working with curable.
Curable.
Curable,
Mhm.
and that's a question mark. That's a
Yeah.
question mark.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
uh-huh. I mean, curable I mean, titles can change, but we're
Yeah.
posing the question is
Understood.
curable. Yeah. Mhm. So, yeah, so we will see. Plugging
Oh,
away at that. Mhm.
No, you want to go?
yes. Um, for those that don't know, Nicole is also an adjunct professor, journalism professor at Morehouse College. So being an HBCU graduate, two-time HBCU graduate, and then now contributing to HBCU education, that's got to make you feel great. I just want to know how that all started. When the idea come up, and you already have been a professor at WSSU as a matter.
Ye Yeah, I taught a couple semesters at my alma mater
Mm,
early on, and that was they had a need, and it called me, and that's where the masters came in handy, and I said, "Sure," how and I was able to develop the course and really kinda develop something that I wish I'd had,
right.
as I was starting to think, multimedia, and so that was really fun
What's the name of the course?
well, that was at,
Was it
Winston-Salem
Sam?
State. I was teaching it was a standard news reporting course, but I mixed in, uh, writing, and I did live shot labs. I did something for the
Mm,
students who were interested in, broadcast, as well as those who were looking to break into newspaper newsrooms. And
nice.
so by then I had done a little bit of both. And at Syracuse, we used to do these live shot labs. And so I just pulled things that had really helped me together. But that was years ago. And so Morehouse is a part of my 2.0. I decided as I was transitioning and as I was playing this long game, and I saw myself curating a different phase of my career. I said, I want to get back to the classrooms. Was doing training with Ida B. Wells and speaking at conferences, and always loved to teach and train and mentor. But it had to be at HBCU. And there was no, so when I transition, I said, at some point, it was that summer. I left WSB in May, the end of May, and started at ProPublica in June. And I was sitting on the back deck that summer and just writing out goals. And I said, at some point, I want to get back to a HBCU and I want to teach journalism. And so I started telling people, I wrote it down, I write everything down, and I started emailing the heads of departments and saying, hey, this is who I am. I now have more time on my hands, more control over my schedule. If you ever have the need for this or a guest lecturer or whatever, Ron Thomas, who's now the department chair of what is now the Department of Sports Culture and Social Justice Journalism
Mhm.
at Morehouse, hit me back at like midnight on a Friday. Like I had just written the email. There's no job posting anything. I'm just speaking this. I'm putting myself out there in the world. And that day, it was a Friday evening, and he said, "Did you know I was looking for adjuncts?" And I said, "No, I did not." So they had just received the Jordan Foundation money and were expanding from a sports minor into what is now our major. And he initially asked if I could teach a news writing course. And so I got a syllabus together and sent it his way. And then he said, actually, you teach social justice journalism. And I said, well, yeah, I can't. Now, look, I don't know how many institutions have this course, but I know if you come to my class, I made it.
Right.
And so I said, sure. I said, let me shoot you an idea next week. And it's really no difference. What we talk about in social justice journalism is framing and impact, right? The premise I start on, what I thought of as I was developing this course, I said, there are two things I know. Facts are non-negotiable, but framing is a choice. And our framing lends itself, all of our journalism lends itself to social justice. I'm taking all of the politicizing phrases and all of that out of it. What is social justice? It's simple, right? everything we do in society lends itself to social justice, whether we're talking education, healthcare, access to anything, food insecurity, whatever. In journalism, and I don't care what anybody tells you, journalism is a form of activism. And I'm going to tell you why. I don't care what manager doesn't like to hear this or whatever. When you seek to impact, when you seek for your work to have some sort of impact, we do this all the time. We're going to shine light on something, an injustice, a person, give a voice to the voiceless. We say this in many different forms, but it's activism through journalism. We seek to reveal something so that someone can do something about it. We don't investigate things because everything is going well. We don't investigate things because everybody knows, right? We're doing one of two things. We're exposing wrongdoing, injustice, whatever, or we are letting people know something they had no idea was going on. We are revealing something. And so when we are framing a story, we choose who is the primary voice in the story. We choose how to enter the story. We choose what to leave out of it. This is all a part of it. We just call it the editing or paring down something or going, but we're making choices every day about what we put out and how we put it out there. And if we are receiving or getting the impact that we seek, it lends itself to social justice. It lends itself to us being able to navigate a better society. Okay. And that's what that is. And we do that all the time at ProPublica. And we do it in all newsroom, but we have the mission statement and the thing at ProPublica. So
Understood. And that's remarkable. And I just love the way you summarize that. I'm totally on board with it. Shout out to Ron Thomas, by the way. Like that's a throwback name for me because he's somebody I interacted with way, way long ago. He used to be a sports writer at the Marin
yes.
Independent Journal. And I was an
Yes.
intern at the Marin Independent Journal a long time ago, much after he had already left. But yeah, it's just it's a good guy to know.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. He's like a Greg Lee, right? Some people
Yeah.
just kind of touch folks across the generation. So
Exactly. And
mhm.
obviously he's touching a whole new generation now at
Yes,
Morehouse. So it's pretty
yes,
remarkable to see how he's built that program from the ground up.
yes,
Um,
definitely.
so I wanted to talk a little bit about some of your very recent work and some of the work that maybe that you can share with us that you're doing now. The story that stuck with me, and I think stuck with a lot of people, was about the Black woman Cecilia Lewis,
Mhm,
who was an administrator in schools and, for lack of a better word, was chased out of not one town but two.
mhm,
Um, can you talk to us about how that story came to you
mhm.
and how you sort of went about the reporting process there?
Yeah, absolutely. I will tell you, I was sitting on the phone. It was December of 21. I was sitting on the floor in my room talking to Matt Johnson at WSB. Matt and I were just catching up. And we were talking about how crazy the school board meetings were getting. And he was like, there's this lady in Cherokee County, this Black woman. She quit her job. She never started that job, but like I feel like uh, you know there's more to that. And I said, I know exactly who you're talking about because I'd been thinking about her. I always think about what I have not heard enough about in stories. And I think when we're talking about enterprising, like your natural senses, your curiosity, the things we bring to the table as journalists, like just use that, right? Because she wasn't an unknown. There had been a couple of quick, maybe a local story in the Cherokee Tribune. I think she wrote a letter saying, why she was leaving, or she didn't start. She hadn't started. And so we knew things were crazy at the school board meetings there too. And when we got off the phone, I went to her LinkedIn and I saw something that I'd never seen reported, that she came here to Cobb County and had been here for 2 months. It was on her LinkedIn, and she was out. And I said, "Wait a minute."
Thumbs up.
Yeah. I would be honest. I told this to a group I was training. I was like, "Seriously, my Black people in trouble spidey senses one." Like, something happened to this woman, and she was like a director of social studies. And I knew from some record that I had from reporting on COVID that the CRT stuff was ramping out, and I could see board members' emails in Cobb County and the way that so people were getting guidance on what CRT was. And all of a sudden, Cobb was voting on this thing. This is before we know in a mainstream way what the CRT uproar is about. They were getting guidance. I saw things from like the Heritage Foundation and political, just very politically driven things seeking support from school board members who started making policies, who started voting on policies that seemingly came out of nowhere. That was around the time she had stepped out of the social studies role. So I started filing records. So I went, well, first I contacted her. She ignored me. I didn't hear back. I could see over the months where she was looking at my LinkedIn profile. I have the, premium, so I can see who's looking. And I said, okay, maybe she's considering this. So I left that alone. But that's not the only way you report, right? You don't wait for somebody to talk to you. And I'd gone to my editor and I said, like, I think the story will be about, I had one observation besides Lewis, that parents were hitting podiums at school board meetings across the country saying the same exact things, and nobody thought that was abnormal. And so my common sense is telling me, like, you don't wake up one day and say those things. I wanted to know more about what was driving it, the organization behind it, what was driving this. And then as a mom of three, two of whom were in the public schools, as a Black mother, I said, I didn't get the memo to show up at the school board meeting. And we're very involved parents. So it wasn't making sense to me as outside of my journalistic shoes or what. I'm like, this has a face. And it seemingly came out of nowhere, but it couldn't have come out of nowhere. So like, what's the deal with this move? So I started filing records in Cherokee County School District, and I just did a couple of keywords on the records request, and I think they came back with a quote of $8,000 to get 4 weeks worth of emails mentioning Cecilia Lewis. And that's when I knew. I said, because I wanted to see who was behind driving her out before she started. They're gonna complain. They're gonna write in. These aren't phone calls that are being made. And so I had to pick a week because we weren't going to pay $8,000. And I said, I picked midweek to midweek encompassing a school board meeting that had gone wow. And that's when I found names of people. I found form letters. I say, oh, everybody copy and pasted the same letter in a certain amount of time. So this is getting at what you know,
Can I just walk through real quick here? Just there's a curiosity that starts here in terms
yeah,
of you
yeah.
call it your spidey sense for Black people in trouble, and I love that.
Ye-
But also, you immediately start digging in and filing FOIAs. Okay, you're
Yeah.
looking for records, and that
Mhm.
includes emails in particular. And so
Yes.
there's a thing that happens when you file FOIAs, and this always happens. It's a frustration of mine. I'm sure it's a frustration of yours. Well, they'll come back and they'll give you some extraordinary dollar amount to get those documents,
Mhm.
and you have to make a decision whether or not you're going to continue, change the request, do a new request, whatever. And so it's always interesting to me how you navigate that situation.
Yes. And
Um,
I have to navigate it because at this point, I still don't have the green light to do the story in my organization. I have an idea that I've talked about, but like I don't have the memo and the proof that this is what my spidey senses tell me it is. And
Yeah.
in that email, I'll say this, and the rest is history. But in those emails that I requested, there was a person who had written in and said they were complaining about the rhetoric at a school board meeting that they'd attended, and said they heard someone say, you know, I'm paraphrasing here, is very close to this. Where are the coloreds? The coloreds aren't here because they don't care about their children. And I said, in this year of the Lord, 2022, or whenever that happened in 2021, I said, somebody asked about the colored.
Mm.
So naturally, I want to call that person. This is in hundreds and hundreds of pages that I got back. And that person returned my call. And that person said, I have something you probably want to hear. And I said, oh, yeah. That person had gone to a clubhouse meeting on a golf course in Cherokee County. They were invited out there and had a recording of a 2-hour meeting that turned out to be a training session for parents. And I had the photo. We did not publish the photo. I had the photo, and it was packed with white people, not
Mm.
a person of color. It's like on a Sunday afternoon in a golf course clubhouse in Cherokee County, Georgia. And they were being taught that their children were being demonized for being white. They were being played recordings. They were getting packets of information. They were being told this was ahead of all the legislation that came out. They were being told like what points of contact they had at the state board and in the governor's office. They were being coached on their best chances for landing on Fox News. That's where we get the whole quote about Tucker Carlson and how. And I was like, it's what I could not have. You can't make it up, but you know something. There's like organization. Something had to happen to rally people in a certain way and then get them to do. And then I got access to the private Facebook group through someone, and that's where we saw the fake Cecilia Lewis sightings and the things that they were saying about her family, the way they had researched her. Um, and she still wasn't talking to me. So then I went to Maryland to find her, and she still wouldn't talk to me on the record. And uh, she came around after, I think, me being able to tell her that I knew a lot of things already. And we were going to do the story even if she didn't talk, because we had enough to do a really good story. The voices would have been different. We would have entered it through other people. And she came around. And then it turned out to be it was our most read story last year. And to me, a definitive
Good.
story of how we got into the parental rights movement.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely. I mean, it's a story that I read at the time it was published, and I was, just struck by. Obviously, I'm here in the DC area, so I kept thinking about Loudoun County, and I kept
right,
thinking about the different issues going on in
right.
Virginia. And so it was just, it struck a nerve, if you will, in terms of impact nationally, and sort of the revelatory way that an investigation like this does when it tells you about these sort of shadowy efforts and groups.
Yeah, so it's been very interesting. Right now, we're in the middle of publishing a series. Soon after the Lewis story, it started tracking school board meeting arrests and people who had been charged in this space, and started a database on that. And so we are publishing narrative chapters out of different places. We've done one out of Arkansas, Conway, Arkansas, Winston-Salem, North Carolina, one that is coming out of New Jersey, in another one, and a final piece that will be multimedia that will link you to the chapters. But that led me to want to know more about the space. And so that's how we started this series.
Tremendous work, and it's been awarded, correct? That particular story
Oh, yes, the, with the
on
Sydney
Cecilia.
Award.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, Sydney Award, and it's been nominated in a few spaces. NABJ is coming up. It was nominated at EWA. And so, but I think the most important thing for me, is I like to hear that feedback that, oh, I learned something, or maybe think about where I live and what's happening. And what I tell my students is like, at the end of the day, an investigation, a quick turn, whatever it is, we're a first draft of history. So we're going to help whoever comes after us understand this time. So if we think about our work in that way, uh, it's all valuable, but it's important to me to have an accurate record of the time.
Absolutely.
I felt like it was important to get Miss Lewis's voice in that, though. I think it would have worked if you didn't keep on. The fact that you kept on going after that makes the story a whole different animal that you had.
Ooh, yeah, and I thank her for that. I'm grateful that she that for everyone whoever speaks to you, right?
They don't
Whatever
have to.
what they don't have to. Whether this work obviously requires me, and I would have it no other way, to speak with people who think differently. But the second chapter in this series was a man who has QAnon beliefs, and I show up at his front door. He does not trust media. I don't have a choice but to try to explain to people why their voice matters, why I need to understand where they're coming from and how it fits into this moment. Again, because I'm thinking of the work as a record of the time. And so journaling, I think it's taxing work. It's work that requires you to have an open mind and understand, like, the responsibility that's on your shoulders to. Because a lot of people will say, "Oh, this is leaning this way, this is leaning that way." No, you're gonna hear from everyone. What you walk away with, fine.
Yeah.
But we're gonna get to how we got here, and people play roles in how we get to a certain point. Whether you agree with the character in the role or the method of the thing, so be it. But it's our job to document it, and so I thank everyone who's ever talked to me, and especially Miss Lewis, because that was hard, and I think that opened the door for other people to talk about things now. Educators, like, the story's not going anywhere.
Well, that's what I was just about to say. It's tremendous work and it's an ongoing story.
And
And really isn't over. And in respect to, some of these school boards and some of the decisions that they've made. And, there are political consequences for it. And I think that's what we're
Mhm.
still covering right now,
Yes.
generally across the country.
Oh, it's a democracy beat. That's what I told them at
Yeah.
EWA. It's not your run of the mill ed beat. It is, we are all on the democracy beat. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Um,
Nicole, we are over time, but this has been a tremendous conversation. I
Wonderful.
feel like we've learned a lot, and there are a lot of little jewels in here for people who are listening, particularly younger journalists. We usually like to end though with any advice that you might have. Is there any advice that you could offer for younger journalists, particularly those that might be interested in getting in on the investigative side of reporting?
yeah. We need you. One, do not wait for permission to seek the opportunity. Get out there, take the initiative, and do the work, and seek out the people and the resources that they are more readily available today than ever. I have to shout out Howard University and the work that Nicole is doing there through the Journalism and Democracy Center, through the archives, through Ida B. Wells Society, NABJ, IRE, people like us. Just reach out to someone and say, "Look, I want to do this. How do I get started?" And understand that no one's path is the same. Um, so there are lots of ways to get to it, and your uh, bring your whole self to the table. That your perspective, diversity means a lot of things. We keep talking about this in terms of race or ethnicity, or it's our life experiences. It is what we bring to the table. So bring your whole self because that's needed. Um, but yeah, know that you matter. And again, can't stress it enough. We're responsible for that first draft of history. So
Absolutely.
it stays here when we're long gone.
Yeah.
So that-
Donnell told me this conversation would be special, and I'm so
Told you.
glad we did it. He told me. He told me.
I'm
He told-
biased, but I still told you.
Nicole, thank you so much for entertaining us on this Friday afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you. I enjoyed it. I'll talk to you guys soon.